You should be grateful we even let you stay down there." That sentence burned into my ears as I stood at the top of the staircase, gripping the chipped wooden railing. I glanced down at the cold, unfinished basement where I was supposed to sleep. Again, the smell of mildew rose up to meet me, mixed with the faint aroma of dinner they didn't bother saving for me. Above me, laughter floated through the vents. They were celebrating Emma's promotion, my younger cousin, the golden child. And me? I was an afterthought. A burden. A year ago, I was part of that celebration, living in the upstairs bedroom, helping around the house, working double shifts. Now, after losing my job and most of my savings, I was told I could stay, but only in the basement. No heating, no door, no dignity. And still, I said nothing. But I never forgot. I wasn't always the girl they shoved in the basement. My name is Ava Mitchell. I'm 31 years old, and I used to be the reliable one. The one who picked up the extra shift. The one who drove across town at 2 a.m. when Emma forgot her house keys. The one who never said no. I was raised by my aunt and uncle Carol and Douglas after my mom died when I was 9. She was their younger sister. I still remember her soft hands, her lavender perfume, the way she'd braid my hair before school even when she was running late for work. She passed away from breast cancer just after my 9th birthday, and from that moment, my life became a series of silent compromises. Carol and Douglas said they'd raise me like their own. But, like their own, had conditions. Emma was their only child, born 3 years after me. She had ballet recitals, private tutors, birthday parties with bounce houses. I had hand-me-downs and we'll see, instead of yes. I didn't complain. I figured love came in different shapes. I grew up quiet but observant. I found peace in structure, chores, homework, organizing cabinets. It made me feel like I was contributing, like I wasn't just a guest. After college, I studied hospitality and worked my way up from a hotel front desk to managing one of the most charming boutique inns in the state. The place had character, creaky wooden floors, a stone fireplace, walls filled with art from local painters. I loved every square foot of it. I had a dream of eventually opening my own place. A cafe meets guest house concept. A cozy, community-focused, with rooms named after flowers and a bakery counter that sold the kind of scones my mom used to make. For nearly 10 years, I saved for it. And then, COVID hit. The hotel shut down. My hours were first cut, then erased. And with that, my plans, my stability, my dignity started unraveling. I moved out of my apartment when I could no longer afford rent. Carol and Douglas said I could stay with them until I got back on my feet. It was supposed to be temporary. At first, they gave me the guest room. It had Emma's old posters on the walls, a dusty pink dresser, and a twin bed with a squeaky frame. I cleaned it up, made it mine. I paid for groceries, helped with bills when I could, ran errands, cooked dinner 3 nights a week. But time passed, and things shifted. Emma started dropping hints. It's weird having someone else in the house. Douglas began leaving mail on the floor outside my room instead of knocking. Carol stopped asking how interviews went. And one afternoon, just as I was folding laundry, Carol knocked on the door and said, "We need the guest room for Emma's remote work setup. You can move your things downstairs." The words didn't register at first. Downstairs? You mean the basement? It's just for now. You'll have privacy, she added quickly. Besides, we all make sacrifices in tough times. It wasn't even finished. No walls. A concrete floor. No heating, no bathroom. Just boxes, a dusty futon mattress, and a naked light bulb hanging from the ceiling. I stood there, holding a towel in my hand, numb. But I nodded, like I always did, because I had nowhere else to go. That night, I cried myself to sleep wrapped in a patchy blanket, using my duffel bag as a pillow. Every creak from the floorboards above reminded me I was below them, in status, in space, in importance. I didn't want to be bitter. I told myself, they're doing what they can. But the truth was, Carol and Douglas had more than enough. Douglas owned 2 properties. Emma worked a high-paying remote job. They hosted dinner parties. They shopped at Whole Foods and talked about smart investments over wine. And still, I was sleeping below ground like an unwanted pet. Weeks turned into months. I tried applying for jobs, but the market was brutal. Hospitality was slow to recover, and every rejection chipped away at me. I started freelancing, helping local Airbnb hosts with listings and guest experiences. It wasn't much, but it gave me something to do, a sense of usefulness. One host, a woman named Joyce, became a friend. She was in her late 50s, divorced, and determined to turn her late parents' house into a thriving Airbnb. I helped her design it, create a listing, decorate the rooms. In exchange, she gave me a small percentage of her bookings. "I don't know how you haven't lost your mind living down there," she once told me while sipping coffee in her now beautiful sunroom. I laughed. "Sometimes I think I have." She was the first person to really see me in months. And then one day, I overheard something that lit a fuse inside me. I was grabbing laundry when I heard Carol on the phone in the kitchen above me. Her voice carried through the vents. "She's still in the basement. It's sad, but we just can't have dead weight upstairs. Emma needs that space." Dead weight. That's what I was now. Not Ava. Not the girl who folded their laundry, cooked their meals, helped their daughter study for her SATs. Just a burden. I sat on the cold step leading into the basement, shaking. But it wasn't sadness this time. It was rage. Not loud, chaotic rage. Something quieter. Sharper. A decision. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and remembered my mom's voice. "You're not meant to beg for space in rooms you helped build." The next morning, I emailed Joyce and asked if she'd be open to expanding her Airbnb work. She said yes. Within weeks, we launched a tiny consulting service for other hosts. I managed communications, listing strategy, customer support flows. She handled decor and staging. We split everything 60/40ths. Money started to come in, slowly at first, then more steadily. I stopped asking Carol and Douglas for anything. And I started saving again. One afternoon, while researching local investment properties for a client, I stumbled upon a listing that made me stop cold. It was a 4-unit brownstone. Brick exterior, central location. It needed work, but it was structurally sound. And it was the exact building Carol and Douglas lived in. I blinked. It had been listed quietly, off-market, for legal or personal reasons I wasn't sure. But it was real. And the price was within reach if I pulled together every dollar I had and secured a microloan. I bookmarked it, then stared at it for hours. Maybe it was crazy. Maybe I should have walked away. But I didn't, because something in me had shifted. I didn't want their approval anymore. I wanted my life back. They had no idea what I was planning. For weeks, I went about my routine like nothing had changed. I folded laundry. I nodded politely when Carol asked me to take out the trash. I smiled when Douglas asked if I could help Emma move her desk upstairs for better lighting. All while I worked silently behind the scenes. I researched the building's history, ownership, and sale terms. It turned out Douglas had bought the place 20 years ago, but due to bad investments and an expensive refinance, he was now under pressure to sell quietly, likely to avoid the gossip. It was a seller's market. But this brownstone needed work, and the listing was buried. That gave me leverage. Thanks to the Airbnb consulting business, a personal loan from Joyce, and the small amount my mother had left me in a trust one could now access at age 30, I had just enough. Not a lot, but enough to make an offer. A real one. I hired a lawyer, someone I'd worked with through Joyce, and we structured the offer through an LLC. The name? Mitchell Haven Holdings. It felt poetic. A week after submitting the offer, I got the call. "Ava, it's official," my lawyer said. "The building is yours." I remember sitting on the cold basement floor in complete silence, clutching the phone in one hand and the key in the other. Mine. The building that housed the people who had made me feel like I was worth less than dust was now legally mine. I didn't laugh. I didn't scream. I just breathed, deep and full. I didn't rush to tell them. No, that wasn't the plan. I wanted this moment to unfold slowly, like pouring honey. That weekend, they hosted a little brunch. I stayed downstairs as always, but I heard everything. Carol was bragging about Emma's promotion. She might be moving to New York soon. So proud of her. Douglas was talking to a friend about how we're finally letting go of some property, cleaning things up, you know. I smiled. Letting go indeed. The next morning, I walked upstairs with a calmness I hadn't felt in years. Carol was in the kitchen stirring oatmeal. Emma was at the table scrolling through her phone. Douglas was reading the paper. Ava, did you bring up your laundry again? Carol said without even turning around. I pulled the envelope from my coat pocket and slid it onto the table between Douglas and his coffee. He glanced at it. What's this? You might want to take a look before you say anything, I said softly. He opened it slowly, unfolded the documents, and then froze. Emma looked up. What is it? Carol took it from his hands and started reading. Then silence. Is this a joke? She finally asked, her voice stiff. No joke, I said. It's a purchase agreement. The building has officially transferred ownership as of last Friday. Mitchell Haven Holdings is the new owner. That's me. Douglas went pale. You bought this place? Emma blinked, confused. But how? You don't even. How did you afford this? I worked for it, I said. While living in your basement. Quietly. Efficiently. And now, here we are. Carol scoffed. Why didn't you say anything? Because, I said, pulling out a second envelope. You wouldn't have listened. I placed it in front of them. These are your new rental agreements. They didn't speak for a full minute. It was the most satisfying silence I had ever heard. Carol's face went red. You can't just, this is our home. We've lived here for years. I tilted my head gently. And now you can continue living here. Under lease. At fair market value. I'm not kicking anyone out. I'm just setting some boundaries. Douglas looked down, humiliated. He had always prided himself on being in control. Now, he didn't even own the roof over his head. Emma stood up. This is crazy. You really went behind our backs like this? No, I said. You left me no choice. They started talking over each other, excuses, accusations, confusion. I stayed calm. I had already planned for every possible reaction. Carol tried guilt. We took you in. We gave you a roof when no one else would. And then you shoved me underground, I replied. Literally. Emma rolled her eyes. So, this is revenge? No. This is balance. That evening, I returned to the basement, but not to sleep. I collected my things, piece by piece. I had already set up the upstairs unit, freshly cleaned and vacant, for myself. It was the top floor, with windows, light, warmth. Joyce helped me furnish it, gently used furniture, a couple of thrifted rugs, soft lamps. The room smelled like vanilla and possibility. I slept there for the first time with a view of the stars instead of water pipes. They adjusted. What else could they do? Douglas signed the lease first. Carol refused for a few days, but eventually followed. Emma made plans to move out, claiming she was done with the drama. Good. I didn't want drama. I wanted peace. And now I had it. You'd think once the paperwork was signed and the dust settled, that would be it. But no. The real fallout was just beginning. I didn't expect them to cheer when I handed them the lease agreements. But I did expect a basic level of acceptance, some silent acknowledgement that they had treated me poorly and that I'd risen anyway. Instead, they lashed out. It began subtly. Emma started slamming doors. Carol would leave passive-aggressive notes around the kitchen. Please don't use all the almond milk again. Douglas took the silent route. He wouldn't make eye contact anymore. Would just grunt if I walked past, pretending I didn't exist in the building I now owned. But I kept calm. I had lived through worse than silence and cold shoulders. Then came the manipulation. Carol knocked on my apartment door one evening, face drawn in faux concern. Ava, she started, we've been thinking, maybe this whole landlord-tenant arrangement isn't necessary. We're family. Why don't we just go back to how things were? I looked at her, expression steady. You mean when I lived in the basement while you pretended I didn't exist? Her jaw tightened. That's not fair. No, Carol, I said quietly. What wasn't fair was you calling me dead weight to your friend while I folded your laundry. She blinked. That shook her. I didn't mean, she began, but I raised a hand gently. You did.
And you meant it then.
You just don't like that I'm no longer below you. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Good. She wasn't supposed to. The real explosion came 2 weeks later.
Emma.
She stormed into my unit without knocking. I just got off the phone with a friend who said you're bragging around town that you own this place. I looked up from my laptop calmly. I'm not bragging. I just answered honestly. You humiliated us, she snapped.
How?
She stared at me like I should know. I'm tired of walking into a room and knowing everyone's whispering. That's the girl whose cousin made her pay rent in her own family house. I closed my laptop. Emma, I said slowly, you lived here for free until you were 27. You never once offered to contribute. I cleaned your room. I cooked your meals. I smiled when you brought boyfriends over who couldn't remember my name. She crossed her arms. So, you're punishing us? No, I said. I'm setting boundaries. And I'm building something. That's when it happened. She laughed. The cruel kind. You'll never actually be anything, Ava. You're a glorified maid who got lucky. That stung. Not because it was true, but because she still thought saying it would hurt me. It didn't. Not anymore. I stood up, calm as ever. You're right, I said. I did get lucky. Lucky that you showed me exactly who you are, so I could finally stop wasting my loyalty on people who never deserved it. Carol and Douglas had been listening from the hall. They stepped in, tension thick in the air. Ava, Douglas said firmly, this has gone far enough. We're done playing house with this landlord fantasy of yours. You need to grow up. I turned to him slowly. Douglas, I'm not playing house. I bought this house. I pay the taxes. I handle the maintenance. I manage the insurance. This is reality. You just don't like that you're not in charge anymore. Carol tried again. We raised you. No, I corrected her. You tolerated me. And that's when something completely unexpected happened. Lisa, Douglas's sister, who'd been living in the guest house at the back of the property, stepped into the doorway. I think it's time someone else says something, she said. We all turned to her. Lisa had always been quiet, observant, never interfering. But now her face was firm. I've watched this happen for years. Ava was never treated like Emma. Not even close. Lisa, Carol warned, don't start. But Lisa didn't flinch. Emma got vacations, cars, praise. Ava got chores, cold shoulders, and silence. You used her kindness as a doormat and acted like it was generosity.
Lisa turned to me.
I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I felt something loosen in my chest. Maybe it wasn't too late for someone to choose right over comfort. Carol snapped. You don't even live in this house. Lisa lifted a folded paper from her pocket. I actually do. I signed my lease with Ava last week. She's my landlord too. And I'm proud to say it. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma stormed out. Carol's face turned a deep shade of red. Douglas just stood there, defeated. I spent that night on the roof, under the stars, with Lisa beside me. We drank ginger tea and didn't speak much. I remember your mom, Lisa said finally. She was kind. Too kind. Just like you. I smiled. She'd be proud, she added. I hope so, I whispered. A few days later, I got a knock on my door. Carol. Her shoulders slouched, lips pressed together. I sign a lease, she said, holding the papers. I nodded. I'd like to make it monthly for now, until we figure things out. That's fine. She hesitated. I know you're angry. I'm not, I said truthfully. I'm done. That hit her harder than anything else I could have said. From that moment, the house changed. Not magically, but things shifted. Douglas paid rent on time. Carol avoided me, but politely. Emma moved out finally. Lisa helped me start small renovations, new paint, garden boxes, even a shared library shelf outside the entryway. I no longer tiptoed through halls. I walked tall, because I wasn't someone begging for space anymore. I owned the space. Weeks passed, then months. The storm that once swirled through the walls of that house finally settled. And with the silence came something else, clarity. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology or expecting them to suddenly become people they weren't. That wasn't my victory. My victory was choosing to move forward, not as their victim, but as someone free. Carol kept her distance. She'd nod politely in the hallway or ask short, surface-level questions about the weather. Sometimes I caught her staring through the kitchen window as I planted herbs with Lisa, mint, lavender, rosemary. I never invited her to join, but I didn't exclude her either. The door was open. She just never walked through it. Douglas softened. He started doing small things. Fixing the leaky sink in the hallway bathroom without being asked. Leaving out the trash bins for collection day. Even baking bread once, just like he used to years ago, and leaving a warm loaf on my doorstep with a post-it. Thought you might like this.
D.
I did. And I ate it. And I didn't say thank you. Not out of spite, just closure. Lisa, meanwhile, became a constant in my life. She wasn't just an ally. She was family in the way I'd always longed for, uncomplicated, genuine. I think you finally did what your mother always wanted to, she told me one day as we cleaned out the attic together. What's that? I asked. She wanted you to know your worth and to build something with it. Something that lasts. I blinked away sudden tears. Maybe she was right. Then one morning, something unexpected happened. I was sipping coffee in the sunroom when Carol knocked. She didn't come with hostility or complaints. Just a casserole dish in her hands and an awkward smile. I made this. Lisa said you liked sweet potato. I nodded slowly and took the dish. We sat in silence for a bit. Then she spoke softly. I used to feel like helping you was charity, she said. Now I realize you were the one holding this family together. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I wanted her words to sit in the air a little longer. She continued, nervously tracing a finger along the mug in her hands. I don't know if we'll ever go back to what we were. We won't, I said gently. But maybe we can go forward. She nodded slowly. Maybe that's enough. In the months that followed, the house became something new. Not perfect, but better. We hosted a small neighborhood block party one Saturday. Nothing fancy, just lemonade, potluck dishes, music on a Bluetooth speaker. Kids ran barefoot across the lawn. Someone's dog chewed a sandal. Lisa taught a group of teenagers how to replant succulents. Carol baked a pie. Douglas manned the grill. And I sat at the top of the stairs, watching it all unfold. Not as the girl in the basement, but as the woman who made it all happen. I didn't need to rub it in their faces. I didn't need dramatic speeches or revenge fantasies, played out scene by scene. My revenge was simple. I won by growing. One night, I found a note tucked under my door. It was from Emma. I hadn't spoken to her since the day she moved out, but her handwriting was still the same, rounded, neat, rehearsed.
Ava.
I was cruel to you. Not just once, over and over. I think part of me knew you'd become something bigger, and that scared me. You deserved better. I don't know if I'll ever be brave enough to face you again, but I hope one day I grow like you did. Emma. I read it twice, then placed it in the drawer next to my mother's old scarf. Because it wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about finally being seen. The house had changed.
But more importantly, I had.
I walked taller. I spoke clearer. I no longer said yes when I meant no, or stayed quiet just to avoid conflict. I lived fully. In light, in space, in truth. Lisa and I started a small side project together. Renovating the basement. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. We should turn it into a workshop, she suggested. Maybe even a space for young women just starting out. Somewhere to gather, plan, dream. I smiled. Like a beginning inside the end. She nodded. Exactly. So we painted. Added new flooring. Put up bright lights and a wall of encouragement notes. It was no longer a prison. It was a place of becoming. I thought back to my mother often. The way she used to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear and say, "You're more than they see, Ava." One day, You'll show them who you are without saying a word. And now she was right.
I had.
3 months later, the house was unrecognizable, not because of its walls or windows, but because of its energy. There was laughter in the halls again, real laughter. Light poured through windows that had once felt like barriers. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving under someone else's roof. I was thriving inside my own. The transformation wasn't just internal, it was physical, too. The once drab exterior now gleamed with a soft coat of sky blue paint. Window boxes bloomed with petunias and snapdragons. Children played hopscotch on the freshly paved walkway. Neighbors passed by and waved. People no longer looked at me like I was the help. They looked at me like a woman who had built something. And they were right. Lisa and I launched the ground floor project out of the newly renovated basement. A space for women starting over, divorced, displaced, discouraged. We offered free resume workshops, quiet space for meditation, a small library of self-help and business books, and Friday vision nights with warm soup and silent journaling. Each week, more women came. Each week I saw me in them. Scared.
Small.
Invisible. And then bold.
Bright.
Becoming. I watched one young woman named Janelle walk in with tears in her eyes and a backpack that held everything she owned. By the end of the month, she had found a job and started tutoring 2 other girls in the program. That's when I knew. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was legacy. Emma reached out again. This time through Lisa. She'd moved to Seattle. Started therapy. Took up painting.
Wanted to send something.
A week later, I received a package. Inside was a canvas. It was a painting of the house. Our house. Only, I wasn't in the basement window. I was on the front porch, arms crossed, smiling at the sky. She had titled it, Light Rises Too. It hung in our shared space downstairs, above the welcome table. Every woman who came through the door saw it first. Carol came around slowly. She never became soft, but she became still. That was enough for me. One evening, she sat beside me on the porch and said, "You remind me of your mother more every day." "I hope so," I replied. She nodded. "You've done something here." We didn't need to say more. Douglas eventually moved out, settling in Arizona with some extended family. Before leaving, he handed me a folded note. "You were never a burden. We just didn't know how to love someone stronger than us. I hope you teach others what we never taught you."
D.
I placed it in the same drawer with Emma's letter and my mother's scarf. Proof that even those who failed us sometimes find their way back to truth. And then, one morning, it all came full circle. I was watering the garden out front when a young girl walked by with her mother. She tugged her mom's sleeve and whispered something. The mother smiled, then turned to me. "She just asked if you were the lady who owns the pretty house with the flower windows." I crouched down and smiled at the little girl.
"Yes.
I guess I am." She beamed. "I want to be like you when I grow up." I felt something flutter in my chest. "You already are," I whispered. That night, I sat under the stars on the rooftop again. The same spot where I once cried, once doubted, once planned. Now it was sacred. Lisa joined me with 2 cups of tea. "You thinking about your mom again?" she asked. I nodded. "And how far we've come." Lisa leaned her head on my shoulder. "You changed this place, Ava. You changed us." "No," I said quietly. "I just finally took back the space that always belonged to me." The moon hung high above the house. The wind was soft. The rooms below us glowed with quiet life. And in that stillness, I finally understood. I wasn't just the girl they locked away in the basement. I was the architect of my freedom, the builder of my healing, the light they couldn't dim.